Greetings and welcome, or welcome back as the case may be. Today I'm going to be reading from The Old Ways again. Probably going to be finishing up, which may make this video a little long. A little longer than even the first one. So, it's mainly because there's no more convenient places to end before the actual end of the story. That said, I'm going to be picking up exactly where we left off last time. So you may or may not want to go back and look at part 3 to get a feel for where we're starting. That said, let's get started. The request had been anticipated, and Harold appeared almost instantly with the sword cradled in his arms. He held it out hilt first to Ganita, but she lifted the sword in its scabbard from his arms. The ruby gleamed like an angry eye in the sun as she offered it to Uther. "If you would care to draw it, my lord." There was a grunt of surprise and pleasure from Uther. He reached out his hand and wrapped it around the leather-bound hilt. "The cross-guard and hilt are rather plain, other than the ruby." His voice was neutral and his face blank. The scabbard is good work, though. You mentioned the tanner in the village before? He made this?" Uther's hand twisted against the leather-wrapped hilt as he spoke, settling his grip. "Yes, my lord. It's not his usual work, but he knows his craft." "He does indeed." With a fluid motion, Uther drew the sword and turned it so the point was directed upward. The blade gleamed with its yellow fire, and the men with Uther began to mutter among themselves. Uther's face was still carefully blank. "A fine blade, but I requested a blade like no other, and while its appearance is striking, I see nothing that makes it truly unique." Ganita stamped down her irritation, but it still showed in the pursing of her lips and tightening of her eyes. "If my lord would care to strike that stone there," she gestured to the large boulder nearby. Uther's neutrality broke in surprise. "You wish me to use this blade to strike that stone?" He shook his head. "I see nothing exceptional about the blade, but I'd hardly break it with such mistreatment." "If it breaks, my lord, I'll burn down my forge this day and become a milkwife." He stared at her a moment, then marched over to the stone. His mouth drew into a thin line, and in a quick swipe the sword arced to strike the stone. When the blade hit, sparks flew and a tearing screech sounded. The top of the rock was sheared off, and the blade remained unbroken and undulled. "Truly a blade like no other, wouldn't you say, my lord?" Uther inspected the sword and retraced his steps. "Truly." After a moment his eyes focused on hers. "Does the sword have a name?" "I would not presume to tell you what name your sword should have, my lord." Ganita hesitated before adding, "But I have been calling it Excalibur." He nodded. "It's a good name. And there is no other like it?" "No, my lord. And no other smith that could make one like it." Ganita tensed as her eyes picked up the movement of Edwin and the other knight moving to flank her. Her eyes flicked to the hammer and a herald standing next to it, but they came back to meet Uther's. "There are none left who would know the way of it, my lord. I'm the last." "Good." The sword flashed as it lanced to stab through Harold. Ganita noted the surprised look on his face, the O his mouth formed in his shock. She cried out and lunged at Uther, but Edwin struck her across the back of the neck. Stumbling forward, she tried to right herself, to be ready for the next blow, but before she could straighten, a flurry of punches struck her about the head and shoulders, beating her down into unconsciousness. When her senses returned, she felt a rough, splintery texture of wood against her cheek, and half her body was cold and wet. She opened her eyes to thin slits and could make out the side of her boat. There was a snapping and popping in her ears, and the whoosh of air rushing into a place. "Fire!" her mind called out, and she tried to right herself, but found she was bound by heavy weight. And actually, I think I'm going to stop there. I think this is a good stopping point. We'll finish the story up next week, I promise. But we'll end it here. And I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you're still enjoying it. And we'll catch you next time. Till then, have a good day. Bye.